what are examples of good practice in implementing inclusive employment in line with the CRPD?
In my experience with state policy reviews since the beginning of 2019, I have not come across a country that fully implements the right to work and employment for persons with disabilities. The reason is it is a question of how people view persons with disabilities. It is a question of the mindset that people put toward persons with disabilities. The problem: low expectations. Persons with disabilities are widely viewed as people who need support and being taken care of and can take care of themselves. And that leads to a paternalism that is deeply ingrained in societies. And that prevents societies to get people with disabilities into the regular work environment. Not only, it also is a question that prevents inclusive education. It's also an approach that prevents persons with disabilities to be able to live the way they would decide on their own. So it's a fundamental change that is required, a change in the perception that society has of persons with disabilities. A much more direct perception, not filled with stereotypes, not filled with ableism, but accept persons with disabilities as any other person. Once you reach that, it will certainly be easier to get inclusive employment.
Thank you very much. So, are you also saying that there is a bias in society that sometimes people are not aware of? Some ableism.
There is conscious bias and there is unconscious bias, of course. And together, in the end, they form a society that puts persons with disabilities outside of the definition of those people who fully belong to societies. Yes. That is the main problem. Yes. That you create a society for maybe 80%, and the remaining 20% is somehow also here, but does not fully form part of society. That mindset is what prevents us from moving. And that is why it is so persistent and so difficult to change, because changing the way people think is not an easy task.
Next question. What accountability mechanism exists in the EU? Exist if the EU fails to comply with these recommendations?
So behind the committee's recommendations, there is no police. It is not like in traffic, if you drive too fast, you run the risk of being subject to a radar and a fine. That is not the case here. Our recommendations work in the way that the domestic political process, in a broad sense, picks up our recommendations and discusses them further. That civil society uses those concluding observations as tools in their efforts to change laws, to change practices. That parliaments look at them and see how they can pick it up. That administrative and government entities are constantly reminded of the fact that this is something they have to deal with, because the next review will eventually occur in a few years. So it is not the system that this is the recommendation and now if you don't do it, negative consequences will follow. It is more the thought that constant interaction, constantly keeping these issues alive in political discourse moves us forward.
Thank you for this. What challenge do you think member states face in complying with the CRPD recommendations?
Well, first, it's acknowledging that the CRPD is an ambitious document, but it is not a crazy document. Is acknowledging that what you've always been doing and where you thought what you were doing was reasonably just, that you're willing to put that into question, that you're willing to change fundamentally or the fundamental beliefs that you hold based on what the CRPD requires. I think that is probably the biggest challenge on an individual and a personal level. For a political system, you run into many other obstacles. If you look at institutions where persons with disabilities live and work, you have vested interests from the side of institutions that their finances are not being curtailed, that you do not move financing of institutions, that you don't move those monies to support mechanisms for persons with disabilities. Those are vested interests, and they certainly make themselves heard politically. So you have to overcome these aspects too. So there's a myriad of obstacles that you have to address.
Okay, thank you. Do you have anything that you would like to add?
Well, there would be many things, but I think this is okay.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
your time again.